Among the many ancient writings that shaped the faith of early believers, one book has remained hidden in the shadows, its voice nearly forgotten. Known as 2 Esdras in most English traditions and 4 Ezra in others, this apocalyptic work once stirred hearts with its visions of judgment, hope, and divine justice. Yet over time, it slipped from the hands of most readers, removed from the majority of modern Bibles, and remembered only by scholars and a few devoted traditions. The mystery of its disappearance only deepens its appeal, leaving us to ask why such a powerful and prophetic book was set aside. The forgotten quality of 2 Esdras gives it a sense of urgency when rediscovered. It does not speak of ordinary matters, but of questions that weigh heavily on every generation. Why does evil seem to flourish? What is the purpose of suffering? Where is history heading? These are not distant or abstract concerns, but questions that echo in the hearts of many today. The text confronts these struggles with raw honesty, giving voice to the cry of the righteous while also offering glimpses of God's response and the hope that lies beyond despair. The figure of Ezra stands at the center of this work. Unlike the Ezra known from the Old Testament as a scribe and reformer, here he appears as a prophet who dares to wrestle with the mysteries of life and faith. His words are not detached but deeply personal, filled with sorrow over injustice and confusion over God's purposes. He embodies the struggle of the faithful who refuse to turn away, even when faced with overwhelming darkness. Through his lament and visions, the book draws us into the tension between human pain and divine promise. What makes this text especially striking is how it was received by early communities. The earliest Christians and Jewish readers considered it a voice worth hearing, a revelation of God's dealings with humanity in times of crisis. Yet centuries later, debates over the biblical canon led to its exclusion in many traditions, leaving it hidden away in collections like the Apocrypha or absent altogether. Its removal raises a haunting question. Could it be that a message once set aside still has something vital to say to us today? Rediscovering 2 Esdras invites us to listen again to a forgotten apocalypse, one that speaks with surprising relevance to our generation. Its themes of lament, justice, divine revelation, and hope for the future resonate deeply in a world that often feels uncertain and fragile. By exploring its visions, we are not only entering into the struggles of the past, but also encountering truths that shed light on the challenges of the present. If you enjoy learning about these hidden and powerful writings, make sure to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps bring these forgotten voices to light, and together we can continue uncovering the treasures of ancient wisdom. The figure of Ezra in this writing emerges not simply as a leader or teacher, but as a man deeply wounded by what he sees around him. His voice rises in lament, carrying the anguish of a heart that cannot reconcile the faithfulness of God with the brokenness of the world. He looks upon injustice, upon the suffering of the innocent, and upon the triumph of the wicked, and his spirit is torn with questions. Why does corruption flourish? Why does evil seem to grow stronger while righteousness is mocked and diminished? These questions rise not only from Ezra's lips, but from the hearts of countless people across the centuries who have looked at the state of their world and asked the same. The lament is raw and honest, refusing to hide behind platitudes or easy explanations. Ezra cries out with boldness, daring to bring before God the pain that weighs upon him. His struggle mirrors the ancient voices of Job and the psalmists who lifted their complaints to heaven, not as a sign of disbelief, but as a sign of faith, because only those who truly trust God can wrestle with him in such a way. Ezra's grief becomes a testimony to the depth of his devotion. He does not walk away in silence, but rather confronts God with the hardest questions, yearning for understanding and justice. The world that Ezra describes feels disturbingly familiar. He speaks of violence unchecked, of oppression reigning over the weak, of those who plot wickedness prospering while those who seek righteousness suffer. His words could easily echo in the streets of our own time, where wars displace families, corruption eats away at governments, and those who live with integrity are often ridiculed or ignored. The lament transcends its ancient context, becoming a voice for every generation that has looked at the gap between the promises of God and the visible state of the world. Ezra's lament also captures the inner tension of faith. He knows the history of his people, he knows the covenant promises, and yet he struggles to reconcile them with present reality. If God is just, why do the wicked prosper? If God is merciful, why is suffering so prolonged? These questions pierce through the surface of religious routine, pressing into the deepest mysteries of divine providence. They are not the musings of a skeptic, but the struggles of one who longs to understand, one who cannot let go of God, even while demanding answers. The beauty of this lament is found in its vulnerability. Rather than pretending that faith removes all doubt, Ezra demonstrates that true faith is often marked by seasons of wrestling. His lament allows space for the believer to be honest about sorrow, confusion, and disillusionment. It gives permission to bring before God the cries that would otherwise remain hidden in silence. Through Ezra, the sacred act of lament is dignified, showing that God does not despise the questions of his people, but receives them as part of a living relationship. In drawing attention to the cries of the righteous, the text also exposes the fragility of human hope when placed in worldly systems. Empires rise and fall, rulers fail, and the structures of society crumble under the weight of corruption. Ezra's grief is not only about individuals, but about the broader state of humanity. He sees the direction of history and feels overwhelmed by its darkness. His lament is a protest against despair, a refusal to accept that injustice is the final word. This lament speaks across the ages because it reminds us that to be righteous is not to be free from sorrow. It is to stand in the tension between what is and what should be, between the brokenness of the present and the promise of restoration. Ezra's cry becomes a mirror for all who look upon the world with compassion and feel burdened by the suffering of others. His voice assures us that even prophets, even the most faithful, were not untouched by the weight of human grief. What makes Ezra's lament even more striking is the way it prepares the ground for revelation. Without the honesty of his questions, the visions that follow would not carry the same depth. His cry becomes the soil in which divine answers will be planted. The text invites the reader to journey with Ezra through his grief, not to rush past it, because only by facing the darkness honestly can one truly appreciate the light when it comes. Ezra's lament is not simply a personal outpouring. It becomes the collective voice of humanity crying out for justice. His questions echo from the ruins of Jerusalem, but they also rise from battlefields, from hospital wards, from the weary hearts of those who long for deliverance. The cry of the righteous is never limited to one generation. It is the sound of humanity longing for God's kingdom to break forth and for his justice to be revealed. Through Ezra's words, the forgotten apocalypse captures something timeless. That lament is not weakness, but the very place where faith encounters the mystery of God. The struggle with doubt does not negate devotion, it sharpens it. Ezra's honesty becomes a model for all who have felt the tension between God's promises and life's realities, and his cry sets the stage for the answers that will follow. Out of the depth of lament rises a voice from heaven, not in the form of thunder or fire, but through the presence of a messenger. The angel Uriel is sent to engage Ezra's questions, to reveal mysteries that lie far beyond the grasp of human wisdom. What follows is not a set of simple explanations, but a dialogue that stretches the mind and humbles the heart. Ezra seeks to understand why the world is filled with injustice, why suffering persists, and how God's purposes unfold. And Uriel responds by lifting the veil on realities that can only be glimpsed through revelation. The exchange between Ezra and the angel reveals the limits of human understanding. Uriel repeatedly reminds Ezra that there are boundaries to what mortals can comprehend. Just as the sea cannot be measured or the depths of the earth fully known, so the mind of man cannot contain the fullness of God's plan. Ezra is challenged to recognize that divine wisdom operates on a scale far beyond human capacity. The prophet longs for clarity, yet he is reminded that humility is the foundation of true insight. These revelations are not designed to silence Ezra's questions, but to reframe them. He is invited to see that what appears as delay or injustice is often part of a larger design that remains hidden for now. The angel speaks of time as something measured by God with precision, like seeds sown in their proper season, each unfolding at its appointed moment. This perspective confronts human impatience and the desire for immediate answers, teaching that divine timing is never arbitrary, but purposeful. One of the striking themes of the angel's revelations is the purpose of suffering. Uriel explains that trials refine humanity, shaping character and preparing the faithful for what is to come. Pain is not meaningless, though it may feel unbearable. In this way, suffering becomes both a test and a teacher, leading those who endure it toward maturity and deeper dependence on God. Ezra is not given a simple resolution to the problem of evil, but he is offered a vision of its place within the divine economy. The angel also addresses the scale of divine justice. While Ezra sees the prosperity of the wicked and the hardship of the righteous, Uriel points to the certainty of ultimate judgment. The present imbalance is not permanent. Every deed will be weighed and every wrong accounted for. The delay of justice is not its denial, but part of a greater unfolding in which mercy and patience are extended before the final reckoning. This reassurance anchors Ezra's faith, reminding him that the story is not yet complete. In the dialogue, Ezra is pressed to consider the difference between human limitation and divine sovereignty. Uriel challenges him with questions he cannot answer, comparisons that highlight the narrowness of human perception. These moments do not belittle Ezra, but invite him to recognize his place within creation, to see that wisdom belongs to God alone. The tension between longing to understand and learning to trust is at the heart of this heavenly response. The angel's words reveal that God honors the seeker. Ezra's persistent questioning does not result in rebuke, but in revelation. His honesty becomes the doorway through which divine mysteries are unveiled. The text portrays a God who does not fear the questions of his people, but who responds to them with patience, depth, and profound wisdom. This dynamic encourages all who wrestle with doubt to continue seeking, confident that those who ask will be answered, even if not always in the way they expect. The revelations also highlight the necessity of perspective. While Ezra looks at the immediate, Uriel speaks of the eternal. While Ezra sees injustice in the present, the angel points to a future where justice is complete. The gap between the two is not denial, but a call to patience and faith. Through this dialogue, the reader is reminded that faith is not the absence of questions, but the trust that God's answers, though sometimes hidden, are sure. As the conversation unfolds, a pattern emerges. Human lament leads to divine response, and divine response leads to deeper faith. Ezra's questions are not fully resolved, yet he is drawn into a greater vision of God's plan. This dynamic speaks to the rhythm of spiritual life itself, where prayer often begins in pain but leads into a deeper encounter with the divine. The angel's revelations to Ezra remain one of the most profound portraits of this mystery, capturing the way heaven meets earth in the dialogue between doubt and faith. The revelations given to Ezra begin to take on an apocalyptic shape as the angel unveils the unfolding of history. Time itself is described not as an endless cycle, but as a carefully measured span with a beginning, a middle, and an appointed end. This concept is central to the vision, for it suggests that human history is moving toward a decisive climax, one that has been known and set by God from the beginning. For Ezra, this understanding reframes his despair, showing that the chaos of the present is not without purpose, but part of a divine narrative that is moving toward fulfillment. The prophetic timeline is presented through images and metaphors that stir the imagination. History is likened to divided portions, as though carved into segments that reveal a progression toward final judgment. Just as the days of creation followed a pattern, so the course of humanity follows an ordered path. Each stage builds upon the last, leading inexorably to the moment when God will intervene decisively in human affairs. These images invite reflection not only on the destiny of nations, but on the brevity of individual life, reminding all that time itself belongs to God. Ezra is shown signs that will precede the end, markers along the path that warn of the approaching climax. These signs include turmoil in nature, moral decay among people, and upheaval in nations. The imagery evokes a world unraveling, a creation groaning as it approaches its appointed hour. For the reader, these descriptions stir both fear and anticipation, for they suggest that the crises of history are not random, but are themselves signs of the times. The timeline emphasizes that history has a direction. Unlike the philosophies of the ancient world that viewed time as a repeating cycle, the vision given to Ezra presents time as linear, moving toward a specific conclusion. This understanding aligns with other apocalyptic writings, such as Daniel and Revelation, which also describe the rise and fall of kingdoms leading to the final establishment of God's rule. Ezra's vision therefore contributes to a broader biblical pattern, situating itself within the stream of prophetic tradition. The apocalyptic imagery speaks not only to the fate of the world, but also to the posture of the faithful. The knowledge that time is moving toward an end calls for vigilance, for readiness, and for endurance. Ezra is reminded that the faithful must not grow complacent, for the signs of the times are given as warnings, urging preparation. The prophetic timeline is not intended to inspire speculation alone, but to call forth a way of living that is sober, watchful, and rooted in hope. One of the striking aspects of this hidden calendar is its sense of urgency. The angel speaks of time as if it were already short, as though the end were near. This perspective is not meant to produce fear, but to instill a seriousness about life. If history is moving toward a climax, then every moment matters, every decision carries weight, and every act of faith is significant. The awareness of time's brevity becomes a motivation to live with purpose and devotion. The vision of time also serves as a comfort to Ezra's lament. While he has grieved over the prosperity of the wicked, he now learns that their time is limited. Evil may flourish for a season, but it is bound by the constraints of God's timeline. Justice will not be delayed forever. It is woven into the very structure of history. This assurance offers hope to the righteous, reminding them that their endurance is not in vain, for the day of reckoning will surely come. The hidden calendar revealed to Ezra raises profound questions for every generation. Where are we on this timeline? How close is the appointed end? These questions have stirred reflection throughout history, as believers in every age have looked at the signs around them and wondered whether their moment was the final one. While the text does not provide exact dates, it does provide a framework that urges continual readiness, for the end could come sooner than expected. This prophetic vision reveals time as a gift, a resource entrusted by God, and also as a mystery, for its fullness lies beyond human control. To rediscover this timeline is to recognize that history is not adrift, but is guided by divine hands toward a conclusion that will reveal both justice and mercy. The hidden calendar, once unveiled, becomes not simply a map of future events, but a call to live faithfully in the present. Among the most vivid and unsettling images in Esdras is the vision of the eagle, a symbol that soars into the imagination and carries with it a weight of meaning for both ancient and modern times. Ezra sees an eagle with many wings and multiple heads, a creature of great power that dominates the earth. The vision is strange, even terrifying, yet it speaks with clarity about the nature of empires, the rise of rulers, and the certainty of their downfall. To understand this vision is to glimpse the fragile foundation of human power and the unshakable certainty of divine judgment. The eagle represents more than a single empire. It embodies the spirit of human dominion that exalts itself above others, feeding on conquest, wealth, and control. In Ezra's time, this vision was widely understood as a critique of Rome, the mighty empire that crushed nations under its rule and seemed invincible in its strength. Yet the symbolism reaches beyond Rome, touching every empire that has risen in arrogance and fallen in ruin. The eagle becomes a timeless warning that no earthly power, no matter how vast, can escape the judgment of God. The details of the vision are striking. The eagle has multiple heads, each representing rulers who rise to power in succession, some stronger, some weaker, but all part of the same beastly dominion. Its wings spread wide, symbolizing the reach of empire across nations and peoples. Yet beneath the appearance of strength lies corruption and decay. The heads quarrel, the wings falter, and the eagle itself is destined for destruction. The image exposes the inner weakness of worldly power, which, though mighty in appearance, is always temporary and fragile. For Ezra, this vision carries both fear and reassurance. Fear because it reveals the scale of human tyranny and the suffering it brings. Reassurance because it declares that the eagle will not reign forever. Its time is limited, its downfall certain, and its power subject to the greater sovereignty of God. The oppressed may suffer for a season, but their oppressors will face justice in the appointed hour. This vision becomes a message of hope for the faithful, reminding them that the empires of men are but passing shadows. The eagle vision also serves as a critique of human pride. Empires rise with confidence in their armies, their wealth and their achievements, often convincing themselves of their permanence. Yet history records the same pattern repeating again and again. Great nations rise, dominate, and then collapse under the weight of their own corruption or the hand of divine judgment. Ezra's vision captures this cycle with prophetic clarity, warning that no kingdom built on arrogance and injustice can endure. In modern times, the eagle vision continues to resonate. It speaks not only to ancient Rome, but to every power that exalts itself above God and oppresses others in the pursuit of dominance. The imagery challenges nations, institutions, and even individuals to recognize the fleeting nature of worldly success. It is a reminder that the structures of power so often trusted as unshakable are in fact fragile and temporary. The dialogue surrounding the eagle vision highlights the contrast between human power and divine authority. While the eagle struts across the earth with apparent invincibility, the prophetic word declares its downfall. This contrast shifts the perspective of the reader, urging them not to place hope in political systems or human rulers, but in the God who alone reigns forever. The vision becomes both a warning and an invitation, a warning against the arrogance of power and an invitation to trust in the permanence of God's kingdom. For the faithful who endure under oppressive powers, the eagle vision offers courage. It assures them that history is not defined by the rise of tyrants, but by the sovereignty of God. No matter how overwhelming the power of an empire may appear, its days are numbered. This truth sustains the righteous, enabling them to resist despair and remain steadfast in hope. The eagle's fate is sealed not by human rebellion, but by divine decree. Its destruction comes from beyond itself, revealing that ultimate authority belongs to God alone. This outcome underscores the futility of trusting in worldly power, for every empire, no matter how great, must bow before the throne of heaven. The eagle vision leaves no doubt: justice will prevail, and the kingdoms of men will give way to the kingdom of God. Among the visions granted to Ezra, none is more mysterious and powerful than the image of the man rising from the sea. The prophet describes seeing a figure of immense majesty emerging not from the land, but from the waters, as though creation itself yields this deliverer. The man towers above all others, commanding awe and fear, not through armies or weapons, but through the sheer force of his presence. This vision grips the imagination, for it points beyond ordinary rulers to one who carries divine authority, a figure often understood as messianic. The sea has long symbolized chaos, danger, and the forces of disorder in biblical imagery. For a man to rise from it signifies triumph over the realm of chaos, victory over what threatens life and order. This figure does not emerge fragile or uncertain, but stands with strength and dignity, subduing the turmoil around him. His presence conveys peace in the midst of storm, order in the midst of confusion, authority in the face of rebellion. Ezra sees in him a ruler unlike any other, one who does not depend on human power, but who embodies divine sovereignty. As the vision unfolds, the man confronts hostile nations. Multitudes gather to wage war against him, yet he does not fight with swords or spears. Instead, from his mouth comes a stream of fire, consuming his enemies with a word. This image recalls the power of God's voice in creation, the word that spoke light into being. Here, that same divine word becomes judgment, destroying opposition and establishing righteousness. The vision makes clear that this man's authority comes not from human might, but from God himself. For many readers, this vision resonates with the hope of the Messiah. The figure's majesty, his dominion over nations, and his triumph through divine power echo the promises of a deliverer who would establish justice on earth. In Christian interpretation, the parallels with Jesus Christ are unmistakable. The man from the sea resembles the victorious Christ of Revelation, who defeats his enemies not through earthly weapons, but by the sword of his word. The vision anticipates a deliverer who will come at the climax of history, ushering in God's kingdom with irresistible authority. The reaction of the nations in the vision is telling. They assemble in great numbers, uniting their strength against the man as if the entire world resists his rule. Yet their opposition only magnifies his power, for their collective might proves futile before him. This scene reflects the spiritual reality that the kingdoms of the world often resist God's reign, but no rebellion can prevail. The man's victory reveals the ultimate futility of resisting divine authority and the certainty of God's triumph. Ezra's vision also speaks to the hope of the faithful. Surrounded by injustice and oppression, he has lamented the power of the wicked. Now he is shown that a deliverer is coming, one who will put an end to tyranny and vindicate the righteous. The man from the sea embodies the hope that God does not leave his people to suffer indefinitely, but that he will act decisively to restore justice and peace. This promise sustains those who live in times of turmoil, assuring them that deliverance is certain. The imagery of fire from the man's mouth emphasizes the power of divine truth. Unlike human rulers who rely on armies, this figure conquers by speaking. His word is enough to dismantle nations, to scatter enemies, and to establish dominion. This aspect of the vision highlights the enduring theme that God's word is living and active, sharper than any sword, capable of both judgment and salvation. The man's authority is inseparable from the power of divine speech. The man from the sea also carries a sense of mystery. He is both human and more than human, a man yet clearly marked by divine power. This tension reflects the dual hope of many apocalyptic writings, that God will raise up a deliverer who is deeply connected with humanity, yet who embodies divine authority in a way no ordinary human could. In this way, the vision bridges human longing and divine promise, revealing a figure who stands at the intersection of heaven and earth. For Ezra, this vision would have carried immense comfort. His lament over injustice finds resolution in the promise of a ruler who will set all things right. For readers today, it continues to inspire hope, reminding them that history is not left in the hands of corrupt rulers or decaying systems. The man from the sea is a sign that God has prepared a deliverer, one who will confront chaos and overcome it with divine power. This vision remains one of the most striking portrayals of messianic hope in ancient apocalyptic literature. It captures the longing for a ruler who is not corrupted by power, who is not fragile in the face of opposition, but who reigns with justice, authority, and mercy. The man from the sea assures the faithful that deliverance is not a distant dream, but a certain reality, one that will arrive in God's appointed time with a majesty no empire can resist. Following the visions of judgment and deliverance, Ezra is shown a promise that touches the heart of the faithful. Amid the destruction of empires and the chaos of nations, a remnant will be preserved. This group is not defined by size or power, but by faithfulness and integrity. While the multitudes may turn to corruption and rebellion, there will always be a people who remain steadfast, and God promises to remember them. This theme of a remnant echoes throughout Scripture, offering assurance that even in the darkest times, God's people will not be forgotten. The idea of a remnant emphasizes quality over quantity. It is not the masses, but the few who cling to righteousness when the world turns away. This truth can feel discouraging, for it suggests that faith will not be the popular path, that those who seek to live with integrity may often feel isolated. Yet at the same time, it carries profound encouragement, for it means that God values the faithfulness of the few, and that their witness is precious in his sight. Ezra's visions highlight the trials that the faithful must endure. They are not promised exemption from suffering, rather, they are called to endure with patience and hope. Their preservation does not mean the absence of hardship, but the assurance that God's hand is upon them, guiding and sustaining them even through fire and storm. This truth has echoed across centuries as countless believers have found strength in the knowledge that God remembers those who remain faithful to him. The preservation of a remnant also speaks to the continuity of God's plan. Even when nations fall, even when institutions collapse, God ensures that his truth does not vanish from the earth. Through the faithful few, his covenant is upheld, his word is preserved, and his purposes advance. This continuity offers reassurance that no matter how bleak circumstances may appear, God's promises remain unbroken, carried forward by those who trust in him. For Ezra's audience, devastated by the destruction of Jerusalem, the promise of a remnant would have been a lifeline. Though the temple lay in ruins and the nation scattered, the assurance that God still preserved a people meant that hope was not lost. The remnant carried the seed of renewal, the promise of restoration, and the guarantee that God's covenant remained intact. This hope transformed despair into resilience, enabling the people to endure with expectation of future redemption. The imagery of a remnant also carries moral weight. It calls the faithful to examine their own lives, to ask whether they will stand firm when others fall away. The vision challenges complacency, reminding that faith is not inherited by belonging to the majority, but cultivated through personal devotion and integrity. To be part of the remnant is to choose the narrow path, to remain true when the pressures of compromise and corruption press in from all sides. At the same time, the promise of a remnant speaks of God's mercy. Even when judgment sweeps across the nations, God does not wipe out his people entirely. His justice is balanced by his compassion, ensuring that those who seek righteousness are not abandoned. This assurance reveals the heart of God, who delights not in destruction, but in preservation, not in condemnation, but in redemption. The remnant becomes a living testimony to his grace. For those living today, the theme of a remnant is profoundly relevant. In a world where faith often seems marginalized, where values rooted in Scripture are increasingly questioned or rejected, the faithful may feel small and isolated. Yet the promise of Ezra's vision reminds them that God sees, remembers, and preserves those who remain true. The remnant is never forgotten, and through them God continues to work out his purposes in history. This hope sustains believers through trials of every kind, whether facing external persecution or internal struggles of doubt and temptation. They can take courage in the knowledge that their faithfulness matters, that God treasures their devotion, and that he will preserve them for the day of deliverance. The promise of a remnant assures them that their labor is not in vain, their prayers are not unheard, and their endurance will be rewarded. Ezra's vision of a preserved remnant therefore becomes a source of strength across the ages. It reminds the faithful that they are never truly alone, that God's covenant endures, and that his people, though few, will always remain. The remnant stands as both a challenge and a comfort, calling for steadfastness while assuring divine preservation. Through them, hope is carried forward, even in the darkest of times. One of the most sobering moments in Ezra's visions comes with the unveiling of judgment. He is shown a scene where books are opened, where every deed is recorded, and where all are called to give account. The imagery is stark, leaving no room for evasion or excuse. Each life is weighed, each action remembered, and justice is administered with perfect accuracy. This vision of judgment underscores the seriousness of existence, reminding all that the way one lives carries eternal significance. The image of books being opened conveys both comprehensiveness and permanence. Nothing is forgotten, nothing overlooked, for every word and deed is inscribed. Unlike human memory, which fades or distorts, these records are exact and enduring. This aspect of the vision highlights the absolute justice of God, who judges not by appearances or partial knowledge, but with complete awareness of truth. The faithful can take comfort in this, for it assures them that their hidden struggles and unnoticed sacrifices are known, while the wicked cannot hide their actions in the shadows. The concept of the Book of Life adds a further layer of meaning. This book symbolizes the record of those who belong to God, whose names are inscribed as citizens of his eternal kingdom. To be found in this book is to inherit life, while to be absent from it is to face separation and judgment. This dual image of books, one of deeds and one of life, conveys both accountability and grace, justice and mercy. Ezra's vision of judgment brings weight to human choices. Every action, every decision, every moment carries meaning, contributing to the record of a life. This perspective confronts the tendency to treat life as casual or fleeting, urging instead a recognition of its eternal consequences. The books opened in Ezra's vision remind all that nothing is meaningless, for everything contributes to the story of one's soul. The sobering nature of judgment also reflects God's holiness. His justice is not partial or corrupt, as human justice often is. He cannot be bribed, swayed, or deceived. His judgment is perfect, reflecting his character. For the faithful, this brings assurance that wrongs will be righted, that oppression will not go unanswered, and that their endurance under suffering will be vindicated. For the unfaithful, it brings warning that no pretense or rebellion can escape his gaze. This vision also highlights the tension between judgment and grace. While deeds are weighed, salvation ultimately rests not in human achievement, but in belonging to God. The Book of Life reminds us that eternal destiny is a matter of relationship as well as action. The faithful are not saved because their record is flawless, but because their names are written by God's mercy. This balance between justice and grace captures the heart of biblical faith, where both accountability and redemption are held together. Ezra's audience would have heard this vision with a mixture of fear and hope. Fear, because it reveals the absolute seriousness of life, stripping away illusions of safety or self-sufficiency. Hope, because it promises that justice will finally be done, that the faithful will be recognized, and that the wicked will face the consequences of their actions. This tension continues to resonate today as people wrestle with the reality of judgment and the hope of redemption. The books opened before God invite reflection and self-examination. They challenge all to consider how they live, what values shape their choices, and whether their lives align with the call to righteousness. This is not a call to despair, but to awareness, urging a life of integrity, humility, and devotion. The vision of judgment serves not only as a warning, but as a guide, shaping the way the faithful choose to live in the present. Esdras' vision of divine judgment does not stand in isolation. It connects with the broader apocalyptic tradition, echoing the imagery of Daniel and Revelation. In each case, the message is consistent. History is moving toward accountability, and every life will be brought into the light of divine justice. This shared vision reinforces the seriousness of the message, making clear that judgment is not an abstract idea, but a certain reality. Through the image of open books and the Book of Life, Ezra's vision captures the balance of fear and hope, justice and mercy, accountability and grace. It reminds the faithful that their lives matter deeply, that their names are known, and that their endurance will be honored. At the same time, it confronts all with the certainty of judgment, urging a life of devotion while there is still time. Following the sobering vision of judgment, Ezra is granted a glimpse of what lies beyond it. For the righteous, the future is not one of fear or uncertainty, but of rest, joy, and restoration. This vision lifts the eyes of the faithful from the weight of trials to the promise of eternal peace. It assures them that judgment is not the conclusion of their story, but the gateway to a life of glory in the presence of God. The image of rest speaks to weary souls. Throughout history, the faithful have endured suffering, persecution, and the burden of living in a broken world. The promise of rest means release from these struggles, a laying down of burdens, and the experience of true peace. Unlike the fleeting rest offered by the world, this rest is eternal, rooted in the very presence of God. It is the fulfillment of the longing for a home that no earthly place can provide. Ezra's vision paints this future as a place of joy, where sorrow and grief are no more. The righteous, who have endured hardship and remained faithful, are welcomed into a life where tears are wiped away and wounds are healed. The imagery evokes the restoration of Eden, a return to harmony between God and humanity, creation and creator. This promise assures the faithful that their sacrifices are not in vain, for their reward is beyond measure. The promise of glory also includes the restoration of justice. Those who were mocked, oppressed, or marginalized for their faith are honored, while those who exalted themselves in arrogance are brought low. This reversal reflects the heart of God's kingdom, where the humble are exalted and the proud are humbled. For the righteous, this future is not only rest but vindication, the public acknowledgement of their faithfulness before all creation. The imagery of fellowship is central to this vision. The righteous are not isolated individuals, but a community gathered in the presence of God. They share in His joy, united in worship and love. This communal aspect reminds the faithful that salvation is not solitary, but shared, a restoration not only of individual souls, but of the family of God. The vision invites anticipation of a day when divisions are healed and unity is perfected in divine love. For Ezra, this glimpse of the future would have been deeply comforting. Having poured out his lament and witnessed visions of judgment, he now sees the hope that sustains the faithful. This balance between warning and promise reflects the fullness of God's revelation. Justice will come, but it will be accompanied by mercy and restoration for those who remain true. The vision of rest transforms fear into hope, assuring that the story does not end in destruction, but in redemption. The promise of rest also carries implications for the present. It encourages the faithful to endure hardship with patience, knowing that their labor is not in vain. The awareness of future joy strengthens present perseverance, enabling them to carry burdens with hope. Ezra's vision becomes a source of resilience, empowering believers to continue their journey even when the path is marked by suffering. The imagery of glory after judgment also speaks to the ultimate purpose of creation. The goal of history is not merely the defeat of evil, but the restoration of all things in harmony with God. The righteous are not only rescued from suffering, but are invited into the fullness of life for which humanity was created. This vision lifts the eyes beyond survival to participation in divine glory, a future more beautiful than words can capture. For readers today, the promise of rest remains profoundly relevant. In a world marked by unrest, uncertainty, and struggle, the vision of eternal peace offers hope that transcends circumstances. It assures that suffering is temporary, that justice is certain, and that joy awaits. This promise anchors faith, guiding believers through trials with the assurance of a glorious future. Ezra's vision of rest for the righteous therefore stands as one of the most uplifting moments of the forgotten apocalypse. It assures the faithful that beyond judgment lies joy, beyond sorrow lies peace, and beyond struggle lies glory. This promise continues to inspire hope across the ages, reminding all who remain faithful that their future is secure in the presence of God. The final vision surrounding Ezra's writings contains a mystery that has puzzled readers for centuries. After receiving visions of judgment, restoration, and the promise of deliverance, Ezra is commanded to write down what he has seen. Yet he is not told simply to write once, but to produce multiple sets of writings. Some are to be shared openly, while others are to be sealed away, hidden from the majority, reserved only for those of wisdom and faith who would seek them with sincerity. This division between revealed and concealed writings raises the profound question of why such powerful prophecies were not made fully accessible to all from the beginning. The notion of sealed writings is not unique to 2 Esdras. It resonates with imagery from Daniel, where the prophet is told to seal up the book until the time of the end, suggesting that certain revelations were meant for a future generation rather than the prophet's own. The idea conveys the sense that divine wisdom is not merely scattered recklessly, but entrusted with purpose and timing. Some truths must wait until humanity is ready to receive them, until the context of history has ripened so that their meaning can be understood. The hidden nature of 2 Esdras itself reflects this mystery. While it was read and cherished in the early centuries of both Jewish and Christian communities, it gradually disappeared from the mainstream biblical canon. Some Bibles preserved it in the collection known as the Apocrypha, while others excluded it entirely. Its removal left many believers unaware of its powerful visions, as though its voice had been deliberately muted. Scholars debate the reasons for this exclusion, whether due to concerns about its apocalyptic intensity, its complex theology, or its unsettling questions. Yet the effect was the same. The book became a forgotten apocalypse, This obscurity only adds to its sense of urgency when rediscovered. If these visions speak with such clarity to the struggles of faith, the nature of suffering, the destiny of nations, and the hope of deliverance, then their absence from common reading becomes all the more striking. It leads one to wonder whether the time of concealment has passed, and whether now, in an age of global upheaval and spiritual searching, the voice of Ezra is meant to be heard anew. The sealed writings once hidden may have been preserved for a moment such as this. The decision to hide some writings while revealing others also underscores the responsibility of the faithful. Divine wisdom is not given to satisfy idle curiosity, but to guide those who seek God with sincerity. The sealed writings challenge believers to approach Scripture not with casual indifference, but with reverence and devotion. Only those who hunger for truth and who are willing to endure the struggle of faith will uncover the treasures hidden within. In this way, the mystery of the sealed writings is as much about the posture of the reader as it is about the content of the text. Esdras' experience of receiving, writing, and sealing visions mirrors the larger pattern of God's dealings with humanity. Revelation is always both given and concealed, both revealed and veiled, calling the faithful to seek, to listen, and to persevere. What is hidden today may be unveiled tomorrow, and what seems obscure in one generation may shine with clarity in another. The sealed writings remind us that God's word is living, unfolding with fresh meaning as history advances. The question of why 2 Esdras matters now is perhaps the most pressing. The themes of lament, divine response, prophetic timelines, warnings to empires, messianic hope, preservation of the faithful, judgment and eternal rest, all converge into a message that feels profoundly relevant to a world wrestling with uncertainty. In rediscovering this forgotten apocalypse, we encounter not only ancient visions, but truths that speak to the present. The sealed writings may have been hidden for centuries, but their unveiling invites reflection on how God prepares His people for the challenges of their time. The mystery of concealment and revelation also invites humility. It reminds us that not everything is within human control, that divine wisdom often surpasses our expectations and unfolds at a pace set by God alone. It calls us to patience, to vigilance, and to a readiness to receive what has been entrusted to us. The sealed writings of Ezra are more than an ancient curiosity. They are a reminder that the divine voice still speaks, and that hidden treasures await those who seek with faith. In the rediscovery of Esdras, we are confronted with both a warning and a promise. A warning that the world is moving toward judgment, that empires and powers will fall, and that every life will be weighed. A promise that a deliverer will come, that a remnant will be preserved, that the righteous will find rest, and that God's justice will prevail. The fact that such a message was once hidden only intensifies its impact now, urging us to listen with fresh ears and open hearts. The sealed writings, once obscure, now return to light, reminding us that God's plan unfolds across generations, that His word is never lost, and that His promises remain sure. The forgotten apocalypse of 2 Esdras may have been neglected by many, but its voice carries power for those who are willing to hear. Its rediscovery is not merely an act of scholarship, but a call to faith, a summons to prepare, to endure, and to hope as the world moves closer to its appointed hour. Thank you for watching this exploration of 2 Esdras, a forgotten apocalypse that still speaks with power to our time. If this message has given you insight or stirred reflection, I invite you to subscribe to this channel so you can continue to discover more about the profound truths hidden in ancient writings. Please like this video to help it reach others, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear your reflections and questions. And if you found this message meaningful, consider sharing it with your friends and family. so that together we can rediscover these forgotten voices and their relevance for today.